Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are. Welcome to this webinar. And then let me start with introducing the topic of today's webinar. You might have seen when you register already, but we were thinking today to talk a bit about strategic pharmacovigilance activities and how they could be outsourced in different ways, and especially how you could control those activities. And we are very delighted to speak with you today. We also have reserved time at the end of the session for interaction. We are very interested in your questions as well, of course. Before we go to the agenda, I would first like to introduce ourselves. And before talking about myself, I would like to start with Olga. Olga, may I ask you for your introduction?
Thank you, Martijn. You're so kind. So my name is Olga Asimaki, and I come from Greece. I joined Biomapas almost 5 months ago as International QPPV. Before joining Biomapas, I was working for several years in Big Pharma as head of pharmacovigilance and medical information, while I started my career in a European CRO. Thus, I believe that my extensive experience in pharmacovigilance activities, along with the pharma background that I bring with me, can bring additional value from the client's perspective in today's discussion. Thank you all for your participation.
Thank you very much, Olga. And then it's my pleasure to introduce Gediminas, or introduce yourself, Gediminas.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Martijn. Hello, everyone. I'm Gediminas Zvicevicius. I'm a QPPV office manager and the head of PV technologies at Biomapas. I'm based in Kaunas, Lithuania. We're having great weather here as well today. Been working in the pharmacovigilance field for almost 5 years now. Started at Biomapas actually from an assistant. Now I'm mainly focusing on managing the full pharmacovigilance systems of our customers and management of our safety database, among other things.
Great. Thank you very much, Gediminas. And then continuing with myself, you saw my name already there. My name is Martijn van der Leur. I'm the head of Global Pharmacovigilance at Biomapas. I'm based in the Netherlands, as I told you, but I'm leading the team in Lithuania and also worldwide. Whatever comes to pharmacovigilance, that's part of our department. For my own background, I've been in pharmacovigilance my whole career. It's my life and passion, basically, for 15 years and counting. Most of that time in Big Pharma in different roles, amongst others as a deputy QPPV for Europe, in drug safety compliance, and also in the technologies area. I've been leading teams prior to joining Biomapas. And now, since more than a year, it's my pleasure to be part of Biomapas, and it's our absolute pleasure today to talk with you about a few of the interesting developments that we're working on, and especially how that could be of interest for you and how such activities could be controlled, especially. So the agenda for today, the introduction piece, we just had it actually, and now right after this, we will continue with a topic called full PV outsourcing. And that is typically something we imagine for, let's say, the smaller to medium-sized companies. Maybe a very large pharma company would never outsource their full PV system. That's fine, and that's why we are also talking about subsets of the PV system that could be outsourced and how you could control it. One of the main elements in there is obviously the PV database, so that's where Gediminas will share some insights. And then we also have a few, let's say, key strategic separate activities that could be outsourced, and that is where I will come back to at the last topic of that session before we dive into the Q&A. And as I said in the beginning, that's where we are very interested to hear your questions as well, see if we have some answers for you there. And I think you can already start adding your questions through the interface here, and then we'll see at the end what we have and what we can answer for you then. So without further ado, let's continue with the first topic, and it's my pleasure to hand over to Olga for this.
Yes, sure. Thank you, Martijn. So as already presented, for the next 10 to 15 minutes, we will focus on the full pharmacovigilance outsourcing activities, starting the discussion with emerging PV models and the presentation of the end-to-end capabilities to figure out how this outsourcing trend can drive operational efficiency and what is needed for, from pharma company's perspective to maintain control. The session will close with a case study to understand how the experts in pharmacovigilance activities are able to support pharma companies to refocus their workload on core strategic competencies rather than the transactional ones. So let's start. PV outsourcing models rate based on what? Based on the size of the company, the maturity of products, the business priority, the resources and the needs of the pharma company. Thus, some companies select to outsource only operational pharmacovigilance activities like case intake and processing, while others also decide to add some basic PV activities such as aggregate reporting and literature review. A hybrid model that you can see in the screen may be the preferred method for companies with products in different stages of maturity, retaining in-house the pharmacovigilance monitoring of products with non-established safety profile. And now it's time to see our main goal and how a full PV outsourcing model looks like and what we mean with the term end-to-end processes. So, a full PV outsourcing model covers the entire spectrum of pharmacovigilance requirements from A to Z. What does this mean? From regional QPPVs assignment, Eurasian or European QPPVs, who have the oversight of all global and local activities, and line reporting of PV responsibles at local level, to creation and maintenance of the quality management system, the operational PV activities, and other tasks, including the safety database. Now, signal management, risk management, aggregate authoring and reporting, and benefit risk assessment responsibilities are also delegated to PV experts under this end-to-end pharmacovigilance services. This strategic partnership reassures the evaluation of safety data and the knowledge exchange between the client and between the service provider that it is transformed to the expert of the product. Overall, full pharmacovigilance outsourcing is the option to optimize drug safety through the full life cycle of products from development to maturity. Now, at the next slide, we will talk about the key drivers of outsourcing. The end-to-end outsourcing is a strategic decision not only to bypass the costs and efforts to establish a PV system, but also to get the right expertise and resources on board. Specifically, let's start with reduced cost. Reduced costs are mainly related to the challenges to hire experienced pharmacovigilance resources in a very competitive environment as is the PV field nowadays. And of course, buy and maintain a pharmacovigilance database that Gediminas will present later. In addition to the reduced cost, as a well-trusted partner can offer stability and flexibility to respond to workload fluctuation and also to provide customized solutions. Moreover, the level of knowledge and the expertise of the PV service providers secure the better outcomes and the quality and compliance of processing by staying up to date on changes to the complex regulatory environment and having internal controls of compliance and sufficient global and local oversight as the local and global processes are integrated. Last but not least, through the outsourcing, companies can allocate internal resources to critical strategic operations, add flexibility and stimulate new thinking, while at the same time obtain significant insights on how to improve the safety profile of their products. So the next slide, please. So the previously mentioned delivery model of pharmacovigilance business transforms pharma into a more proactive agent for patient safety rather than reactive. But what are the key considerations to choose a well-trusted service provider to co-develop your PV system rather than simply outsource to someone that will run in a way that is not known for you, while at the same time you need to serve best practices and co-develop the pharmacovigilance system. So briefly, key criteria are the service provider to meet or exceed your internal standards and understand your objectives to create a fit-for-purpose solution. After the first research and before initiation of PV activities, to qualify the vendor and well-define the responsibilities, building and transparent and open communication. And of course, during the partnership, implement multiple communication channels to exchange information and include QPPV in business discussions to make informed decisions, because the QPPV, even if the service is outsourced, need to be member of the team and need to participate in the decisions. And all this during the last stage, that is during the partnership. So make sure that the process between the company and the service provider are integrated and that clear paths for escalation and resolution of issues are defined. Key performance indicators and compliance metrics will make you feel confident of the quality of the provided service. Let's now see in the last section of this talk how a full pharmacovigilance outsourcing model can be implemented in practice through a case study example. So let's take the example of a clinical stage by a pharmaceutical company that plan to file for first time a drug for European Medicines Agency approval. Due to lack of experience in pharmacovigilance and limited resources, the company assigned to Biomapas all the pre and post-authorization PV activities. So starting with pre-authorization activities, at the next slide, as the marketing authorization was planned for both European countries and Eurasian country, specific Russia, Biomapas assigned both European and Eurasian QPPVs and created the PSMF and summary of PV systems accordingly. Yes, correct. Yes. So the PV activities like global literature monitoring, registration to ultravigilance, creation and maintenance of PSUR schedule studied along with the application of the submission. After marketing authorization was granted, post-authorization phase, Biomapas undertook all the PV responsibilities at global and local level. Global responsibilities, further to what we discussed before, include aggregate safety writing and reporting, ultravigilance profile maintenance, management of third parties, including PV training, pharmacovigilance training, SDA's creation, and oversight of distributors, patient support programs, and any third party, risk management activities, while at local level, local PV responsibles were nominated to conduct and oversee local pharmacovigilance activities to meet national legislation requirements. And what is now the latest status? In the meanwhile, Biomapas had the flexibility to also support new MHRA requirements due to Brexit and due to the changes that market authorization holders in UK should implement. Multiple PV experts are involved in this project at both global and local level, while further expansion is expected as the second product under development will be submitted soon. However, the pharmacovigilance system for this client is already set up. The efforts will be focused now just on the safety-related requirements of the new drug. This allows the client to give full attention to the clinical development program of new drugs rather than concentrating to transactional activities. So with this case study that actually completed the picture of the theoretical part that we discussed before, this full pharmacovigilance part has been completed, and it is now time to restrict our focus on an indisputable important element of pharmacovigilance outsourcing, the PV database. So Gediminas, please help us to understand the critical parameters of the safety database outsourcing.
Thank you very much, Olga. Right, so this part of our webinar will indeed focus more on the topic of outsourcing a safety database. And so in my part of the presentation, I'll go through our experience with selecting a new database and the outsourcing of the safety database in general, touching several points, describing the possibilities, advantages, and considerations when deciding on whether deciding or not to outsource your database. Next slide, please. So I'd like to start with our experience with the selection of a new database. So back in 2020, we finally decided on a major step forward and started the selection process of a new PV database. So we've decided to review 5 solutions, of which 2 were actually excluded at the initial stage, and we were left with 3 major companies providing PV safety database solutions on a global scale. And I'm sure that you can guess probably 2 of them, but I'll keep the suspense for a little bit longer. So maybe you can try and guess the third. So there's quite a few points and criteria which we looked at. But the very general ones are the following. So cloud technology was a big one for us, coming from an in-house managed solution, which was hosted on our servers, which in itself has multiple problems in that setup, basically, with a rather high maintenance requirement in general. With a cloud solution, we're bypassing some of the maintenance parts, as the technical part and support is done by the solution provider, in addition to other benefits, with the main one, among others, being the ease of access for users. The other important point for us was the cost, and not only the amount we see in our current agreement, for example, but what kind of flexibility does the solution provider have or propose in terms of pricing and scalability? And how does the company in general see our relationship? Is it strictly as a customer and vendor, or as a partnership, being open perhaps and willing to discuss different possible cooperation scenarios and future plans of our company and their company together? And third major point was security, which becomes even more important for us as a service provider, actually. When we're providing services for multiple organizations. And that means we need to know how the data will be segregated and how the security will be ensured in order for the data to be completely securely separated from for each of the customers. And whether it is or not possible to set certain limits for users, whether they are internal or external users, based on their responsibilities, their organization, and their scope of activities. So that was a very important point for us. The other one was independence, which was very important for us as well, because well, we really wanted to have as much freedom as possible in terms of what we can do or can't do with the system by ourselves as admin users. For example, like add users, assign roles, create custom reports, dashboards, and such without having to make ad hoc requests on or pay additional costs, ad hoc fees, hourly fees, or anything else to the solution provider if we can do this ourselves. Ease of use and intuitivity while using the system was a big one as well. And that's an important topic for us coming from our previous database and based on our experience, which was, well, rather poor experience with our previous solution. And this was one of the definite struggles for new and existing users in our previous database. And I must say that it's a large improvement in our current one. And lastly, but not least, possibilities of configuration based on current and future business needs. With basically no such possibility in our previous database, we were basically stuck with what we had, basically having to adapt our business processes to the solution and not the other way around. So it was indeed an important for us point that we have the opportunity during our setup to make slight changes to how things work or are displayed. And we're actually very happy that we were able to do that with our current choice. And the next slide is basically opening up the suspense, and I'm not going to keep you wondering about what choice we've made. Based on the list of criteria which we had, of which there were a total of 40, the main ones are presented here actually. The rather obvious choice was Veeva actually, as it ticked pretty much all the right boxes in our criteria. And also there were some critical things which we considered as red flags for us regarding the other major providers. With some points lacking in each of these main categories listed here. Well, everywhere except for the global name recognition, basically. So yeah, this was this was also an important point for us, but not as important as the cumulative result of everything else. And even with that, Veeva is a very major player globally. Maybe just not that well known in terms of safety databases, but that's soon to change, I'm sure. All right, next slide. So moving on from our story, pretty much done with that. I'd like to focus on basically why would anyone outsource a PV database? Well, there's several factors which might influence the decision, with the main ones being the benefits of cloud technology. We talked about that a bit earlier. There's no burden of setup and maintenance and validation on your side if you're outsourcing a PV database solution. That means that this is done by us or the provider who's providing it to us. So yeah, that's an ease of mind there. Also, cost is always important, especially for small and medium enterprises. And why this is a benefit is that the cost is split between organizations, because since we're using the same license for several marketing authorization holders or sponsors, the cost is obviously not a burden for each and every one of these marketing authorization holders to separately, because it's split for each one. Also, continuing about the cost, basically, the more organizations, the smaller cost per case. When a small company would not be able to generate a lot of ICSRs or SUSRs volume, and that would result in a larger cost per case. We are, on the other hand, when we are outsourcing it to multiple organizations, are able to leverage the ICSR volume and have a better price per case and offer this as well to our customers. And the last point, one of the more important points that I wanted to make is that if you want to have it, there's no loss of control on your data. And you can choose actually the level of control on which you want to be involved. And we can have a look at this in more detail in this slide. So basically the choice is yours with the Veeva solution and the setup that we have currently in our system. is depending on whether you want to be involved at all. You can choose the level on which you receive access or not receive access to. So starting from no involvement at all, and you would be provided data on request on an agreed periodic basis or an ad hoc basis whenever this is required and wanted by you. However, there are additional levels of this. So if you want to have active access, periodically review data on your own, or occasionally just have a look at what's going on, you can have access to the system. You can have custom dashboards and reports, which you can run independently from us with the data that you have. You could have view access of live safety data at any point of time. The last level and the highest level of participation as well, actually active participation in the process and inputs during the actual workflows. So not only you would have access to the system, but you could choose in which part, in certain parts of the workflow, basically. For example, after triage, after medical review, after the case is done, basically, and when the closure is initiated, you could have participation in the actual workflow, review the case, have edit access in certain situations. The choice is yours, basically, here, depending on what you want and what we can agree upon. So this is a very important point that I wanted to make, because this is significant benefits for a customer who does want to have the benefit of outsourcing the database, but does not want to lose their ability to have access to it and control over their data. And with that point made, I'll hand my word to Martijn, who will continue on the topic of outsourcing of other strategic PV activities.
Thank you very much, Gediminas, for that compelling story about the safety database. And actually, I'll continue a bit on that, but from a different angle, because it is mentioned as a topic on my list as well. But then from the perspective, what if you would not outsource your entire safety database? And I'm thinking of especially the larger companies. I understand you would not do that. That would not be interesting. But what would be interesting is that nowadays, all these big safety databases, they are on cloud. They come with regular update cycles. And they need testing. You need to revalidate your system. And I've seen in my past what a burden this was already then to the teams who did not have capacity to do all this testing, go through all these scripts all the time. And actually, I will go a bit deeper on this on one of the next slides as an example of how that could look like and how you could control that. But what I'm also showing on this slide are just a few examples of other more separate activities. If you don't want to outsource your full PV system, there could be a moment where maybe some activities would be worth outsourcing, or maybe you are surprised by an audit, or you have an immediate situation where you realize I need to fix something and I don't have the capacity. And that is where it's very valuable to outsource such activities as well, provided that you can trust the quality that you would get on this. And this is what I see also from my past experience, always a bit the struggle, the scary thing. If you consider your most important activities, you don't want those to be in external hands. You want to have control on that. But it also, in my view, comes from bad experiences where you thought, let's try it, let's outsource something, and you get something back which is so bad that you regret the whole outsourcing at all and you wish you had done it yourself. And that is where we are trying to show and build confidence towards our clients to show like, well, if you have the right level of communication and you set the right expectations and you have the right expertise in-house as a CRO, then it can work. And let me just continue on a few of those examples. The SOPs, well, that's typically, it could be either a routine maintenance where you say, this is my set of SOPs We do get regular inputs from our audits or maybe from our users in the safety database, as again, the example there. And could you guys, keep an eye on that, collect all the input and make the updates whenever that is needed? Or the other example, like, oops, immediate situation, we forgot this process, we're all doing it, but it's nowhere documented. Okay, we can talk. We've had these situations where we scheduled, let's say, 2-hour meeting, getting the basic information on such a process and start drafting something, exchanging it, cross-checking with the customer, like, is this roughly what you're thinking of? Yes, no, fine tune, and keep this very close collaboration as if our staff would be part of your department. And that's, I think, the only way how it can work, such kind of outsourcing. Another very practical example is the PSMFs, I think. That is, again, what I've seen in my past. It was already a burden with only an EU PSMF. And we had at some point, one person dedicated to just keeping a PSMF up to date with the routine updates on the compliance data, on the small changes, not even talking about major changes, but this was already one FTE full of work. Now, it doesn't get much easier with all the international legislation booming around GVP concepts, not only in Europe, but also in Eurasia, now in UK, or even some countries within the EU that have their additional needs, like in France, for example. And then questions come up like, how are we really gonna keep that consistent with the EU PSMF? How often are we gonna maintain this? But mostly, who is going to do that? And UK is a very nice example. We will come back to that also on one of the next slides. What to consider there and how to control that. Risk management plans. That's a different topic. And then we come really more to the strategical points, and it also has a link with benefit risk monitoring, for example. This is what I feel a very scary part for companies to outsource, because this is the core expertise. This is the safety profile of your product. You want your control on that. Yes, absolutely. But it doesn't mean that all the work, even from the medical scientific side on that, has to be done by your own employees. If you have a CRO with the right expertise and a bunch of physicians, scientists who can absorb the information on your product, not only looking at ICSRs, but understanding the whole benefit side of it as well. And imagine you have a trigger somewhere from a signal or something from whatever source that makes you to re-evaluate your benefit risk profile. There's a lot of work to be done in the background by these scientists and physicians to come up with a pre-digestible package of, this was what your benefit risk profile looked like. This is the new information. This is what it could change. And this is how we see whether that is still favorable, any additional actions needed. Prepare all of that. Imagine it like a nice, concise slide deck that could be plugged right into your senior safety board, where ultimately your own senior executives are deciding on whether to proceed with such proposed actions or not, whether any label updates would be required or not. But I'm sure you know that there's a lot of work in the background that does not necessarily have to be done by your own people, as long as you have people that you can rely on and dig into this information very thoroughly. Slightly different topic, and I realize I have a lot of words to say on just one slide, so I hope you bear with me. But a different topic is PV regulatory intelligence. I already mentioned this from the side of PSMFs with the expanding international legislation, but it's not PSMFs only, it's in general how worldwide the PV legislation is developing. Luckily, many areas are following kind of GVP-like concepts, but not always exactly the same. And what does that mean exactly for your SOPs, especially when you're operating worldwide? or at least in 2 regions. If you're in EU and you want to step 1 foot in Russia, you already deal with another region where you need to understand, okay, Russia, part of Eurasian region, what does it mean for us then if we want to market our product and be compliant there? So that means PSMF in Eurasian region. Can it be the same one as the EU? Can it be combined? Any specifics? You want to know that, but you also want to know, as these legislations develop so fast, you know, whenever something changes, what does it mean for our current practice? That is where the easiest part of outsourcing is just to get you informed of such updates and information. And that is what many CROs can do for you, of course. The next step is even to take ownership of that information. And then we come to the SOPs again. Imagine we would understand your core set of PV SOPs, and we have the latest information on regulatory intelligence coming in on a daily basis. What we can do is do the impact assessment on your SOPs, and not even just start doing something and implementing it. You know, we can pre-digest it, show you the updates in legislation, show you the impact on your SOP. You say yes or no, or we make fine tunings, fine. But that piece can be fully taken away from you without losing that final control on the compliance for you. Now, last point, and then I promise to move to another slide because we have more slides, but I find it important to also close this out with the whole QPPV topic, because we already discussed, of course, the legislation, the PSMF's benefit risk, but the QPPV is the core person in this whole PV system, of course. What we see already in practice is that the biggest pharma companies, they are not outsourcing their EU QPPV, and I understand that. That's fine. But we do have EU QPPVs, and we usually provide support for smaller clients, even medium-sized clients, who maybe don't have enough work for a full FTE, but they want the proper reassurance that they are legally covered with a proper EU QPPV. So that is for the smaller and the medium-sized companies for sure. But what we see, we even get, well, a lot of attention from the biggest companies in the world who struggle to find adequate people in certain regions, like Eurasian region. They know they need to have a QPPV there. They might not even have a full FTE available for that. Maybe that's also not needed. But where do you get those people who want to work maybe just 0.3 of an FTE for you, or half an FTE in Russia or any of the other states in Eurasian region? That is typically where it's very convenient to have a reliable outsourcing partner who has such people and who can combine roles to make it financially also attractive for you. UK QPPV, yeah, that's one of the latest topics, of course, and I wouldn't be surprised if other local or regional QPPVs would be required in the upcoming years. And I promised to you that after this, I would really move to a next slide, so let's do that. And this is a bit more practical. I mentioned as one of the first points on my previous slide, this safety database testing, and what could that look like? It's potentially a big task, and it is a routine task nowadays coming back. If you're talking about the biggest databases, well, Gediminas was kind enough not to mention names, but I can now say RSG, Argus, Veeva. Doesn't matter which database you have, they're all on cloud and they follow certain update cycles. Meaning, at some point, you will get a notification from your safety database vendor that there is an update planned and that they have certain things in mind to change. So you will get release notes. If we would agree that we help you with the testing on that, it's as simple as providing us the release notes that you got. And maybe you even got some standard test scripts for that from your safety database vendor. So first thing we do, you basically blindly forward to a company like Biomapas, look at it, we look at it, and first assess the changes compared to what you already had. And maybe we can already see if it's the third time we do it, like, oh, you were not using this functionality. Probably you still don't want to use it. So let's flag this and we will check it with you. Are you sure you still don't want to use it? Because then maybe we don't even need to test it at all. Or what happens, I've seen updates of a database that were purely focused on medical devices. And what if you don't have medical devices in your company? You don't want to spend any single minute on looking at such updates. But still, you need to document somewhere that you skip the testing on purpose. Maybe that part is then not validated of your database, but it's fine because you're not going to use it. So that is what I mean with we suggest an approach. We look at the proposed changes, we think it through, like what could this possibly mean for you as a client? And then we have a quick call with you to go through, like, this is how we see it. Do you agree with that? You say yes or no, or we change the approach. Maybe you say, well, we never used it and we want to start using this functionality. We don't really have tests for that. Okay, so maybe we can help you create some test scripts to specifically check on that. That's what I mean with create documents. But once we have those, it's a matter of executing scripts. That's not so strategic, to be honest. This is just manual work. This is somebody sitting there doing the whole test, but documenting everything. And another person looking at that, doing the QC, double checking, was everything tested? Was everything signed off? Is there nothing strange on all these papers? Scan the whole stuff, send it back to you. This is how we see it. We have signed off from your side. Do you agree? Is it complete from your side? You sign it off and you put it in your records and you're done and you're ready for the upgrade. We've done this now a few times. At least the client we work with for that particular example was very happy with that. And there was, still full control, I would say, from this client, but no burden at all. So that is on the safety database, one example. The business continuity SOPs is another example, a bit more specific to what I mentioned already in the previous slides as well. Like for whatever reason, you might find out you're missing an SOP. And this happened with a client who maybe had some text on this, but not really like a dedicated pharmacovigilance business continuity SOP. So it came up from an audit, urgent need to solve it. Came to us and we said, okay, we can help. We have templates for that. We have one ourselves, of course. We have an idea how it could look like for your company. So we share that with the client and we talk about it. Is this what you want? Okay, who are the key people involved in these processes? Do you want to still work with them directly? If so, okay, good. We write down contact details and we will reach out to your company people and see if they agree with the text that we propose. So that's how we come to a draft. And at that point, again, ask the client that this is what we have now. We got feedback from all your stakeholders. Are we good with this? Fine tune a bit. And we approve, or you as a client would approve, sign off, and then it's ready. Or you say, take it one step further. Good, you now as a CRO, we know all the content. Please take it further for training and make sure you chase all the people in my company that they know about this, that they sign off on their training and provide us evidence that the training was done. That's another step that we have done in the past successfully. And ultimately is very controllable for the client. Last example I promised was on UK PSMF specifics, what that could look like. This is, of course, a very new thing. How would you do that? We've spoken with a few clients already, and there can be different approaches to this. But if a client has no preference and we are asked to suggest something, we would say, well, I'm sure you have an EU PSMF. We have a few sections in mind that we would like to see. If it's okay for you, send it to us, and we will take that as a first impression for the UK specifics. At the same time, we can show our UK PSMF template, what that would look like if it's to your satisfaction, so you approve the template. But then based on the, let's say, missing information we need for the UK specifics, we start working. Again, we can work with some of your counterparts if that is needed to get the last information, but we create ultimately a first draft that would be reviewed normally by your EU QPPV, or maybe you already have a UK QPPV, even better. Work with that person until satisfaction, sign it off, and then, well, either it was a one-off because you want to have it in place, or maybe the next step is, okay, now we know all the content and we're in control, so we can do the maintenance as well for you. And then let's agree, do you want to have this updated every month, every quarter, half a year? That is something we're doing in practice, and it works very nicely with our clients. Now, I also promised to reserve some time for questions and answers, so let's try to wrap up a little bit before we move into there. I just wanted to conclude on this slide what you've heard now from starting with Olga and then Gediminas and then myself, that the strategic PV outsourcing, the way we see it, it's not only the simple manual things that you can outsource. You can theoretically outsource everything, full scope. But if you are a very large pharma company, I repeat that I understand you maybe don't want that, or it's not realistic. But there could be selected PV activities where you need support, maybe on a routine basis, but also as that third point, it could be only when you need it. Or maybe you have a contract with a service provider in place, which is a bit silent, and maybe you don't ask anything for a year, but next year there would be something, boom, and you can get fast support on such separate important PV activities as well. Now, how would you do that, and what is essential in this? Just to recapture again, continuous clear communication. I cannot say it enough well to our own team as well, and how we feel about this. Our success stories come from such models where we work very closely with the clients as if we are one of them. And that comes with transparency. Even, I can say we're humans. So even if you think this is not going as we thought it would, we talk about it. That is so essential, and that avoids frustrations. And then you talk as if you would do with any regular team member, how to proceed from there. And that transparency is key to the last point, to build trust. And trust you don't get from a nice presentation or just from a first encounter together. This is what you get through the longer collaboration of seeing this clear communication and transparency, and of course, seeing the final results that have the desired quality. And that is how I think you can outsource a lot of PV activities, not only the manual ones, but also the more strategic ones. With that, I should really stop now because we promised to reserve some time for questions and answers. And I don't know if you found the button already, but there is a button, Q&A, somewhere in this interface where you can click on and you can submit your questions. So I'm gonna have a look now if any of you already submitted something. And then if not, feel free to drop in anything. I'll just give you a moment and I'll have a sip of tea. I realize we're running out of time and I don't want to hold you up. There's a few more questions. I'm sorry that we couldn't answer right now, but I would like to highlight that if you have any further questions, the contact details are here on the slide. We're very happy to answer anything else. There's the email address, bd@biomapas.com. Also, in case you would like to discuss anything else further with us, we are here and very happy to talk with you. So for now, I would like to thank you all very much for your participation and all your questions. And I hope this was useful for you. It was our pleasure to meet you today. So thank you very much. Have a good rest of your day and have a good evening.